All right, next up, I believe we have Guardicore. Who do we have from them? Do we have Trevor on yet?
Yes, I am here.
Hey, Trevor. A little bit about Guardicore and why I think it's super cool that you guys are here. Once again, thank you for jumping on board and sponsoring this insane virtual conference and kind of rolling with the punches. But if you go back and you look at Black Hills Information Security and a lot of the work that we've done over the past couple of years, there's been a tremendous amount of research at BHIS on attacking cloud platforms. And I really believe that most organizations jumped into cloud well before they were ready. And by they, I mean the actual cloud infrastructures, having the security around it that we need. It's basically like, hey, let's take all of our most sensitive assets and just throw that crap up in the cloud and see what happens. And you got people with multi-tenant, they've got, running things in Azure, they're running things in Google Cloud Compute, they're running things in AWS, and without really thinking about how you can tie that all together from a security perspective to stop pen testing firms like us and the attackers that are out there all the time. So with that, sir, are you ready to go?
I am.
All right. So I'm handing it over to you. So take it and run with it.
Thank you for the intro, and welcome everybody to my home office. I'm with Guardicore, security engineer. I'm out here located in Golden, Colorado. Guardicore is a Tel Aviv company. We're based in Israel. Been around since about 2013. Our primary focus is visibility, segmentation, breach detection, and incident response. So I'm going to go over a little bit today about, pretty much in that order. Segmentation. Everybody knows it's pretty much the oldest concept in security. The best way to reduce your risk and to create a better security posture. Still, a lot of the folks that we talk to and that we speak to out there in the wild, wild west, they don't or aren't segmenting their networks. And I could vouch for this. My previous experience was I was a network engineer, security engineer, really being out there in the trenches and doing this with those traditional and firewalls. And, not only is it difficult, but once you're done using those tools, you get very little protection and very little visibility in that east-west traffic. And with those traditional segmentation, those projects and planning and coordination is, of course, very complex. We've got multiple teams involved, SecOps, NetSec, network, infrastructure, and of course your server platform teams. All of those guys need to be coordinated and they need to play nicely together. Once you toss in those distributed data centers and the multi-cloud scenarios, this becomes a very difficult task for all of those teams who are generally really busy doing all kinds of other important stuff. And then the actual act of moving those applications, those servers between VLANs, it requires changes and downtime, and it's high risk. And we all know that that means a really crappy weekend for everybody involved. Summarizing here in this tweet, it may seem like a joke, but it is. It's funny, but it's true. And this is exactly what we hear and we see out there in the wild, wild west. So, having that flat and or flattish network, it's just really not an option anymore. Most of the traffic that you have in your data centers, all that east-west and those perimeters are getting harder and harder to define and defend. So you need to take those measures to reduce the risk, lateral movement, and reduce the impact of those breaches. And of course, everybody's really high on those words of the zero trust architecture, and that makes it really high in our priority list. Business impact of segmentation. This is how we are able to do this and to benefit your business. So first, prevent those lateral movements. We all know breaches happen, so you can effectively segment and you can significantly reduce your attack surface, minimize all the potential for your lateral movements in case of an actual breach. And from our experience, more than 90% of those open ports that you have within your network and within your systems are not needed for application operation, and they just introduce risk. Second, we can protect your digital crown jewels. Being able to effectively ring fence your digital crown jewels across any infrastructure that you guys may have, that basically it keeps those breaches from less critical assets coming into those more high value assets, and protects those high value assets from one another. So it's one of the most common use cases that we get to see out there. And then that dirty word of compliance. It's the one use case where you can't overlook segmentation without actual financial consequences. So thus you need it. So in many cases, regulations require segments to be as small as a single application for critical parts of your network and your business. That's when we get to hear micro-segmentation or nano-segmentation, really get down to a granular level. Fourth on the list here is cloud. Your organizations adopt cloud and your applications become hybrid. This introduces some additional attack surface and it also additional types of infrastructure with its own controls. And then at the very end, here we need to make sure that security allows for innovation. And as business strive to innovate securely, they require access controls to be placed as applications are landed. And of course, security cannot impact that type of information. So how does Guardicore do this? We address these challenges by deploying an agent on all your servers and all your workloads in your environment. Infrastructure agnostic, bare metal, virtualized, public cloud, containerized environments. Ultimately, because we are an agent, or from a serverless perspective, if we have time, I could show you guys actually what our serverless is going to be looking like. We are able to maintain all of the composure and those policies within each and every one of these environments. And then the way we address this, reducing that attack surface and mitigating risk, is we visualize those flows between your systems and your environments so that you actually know what you have. And then once you know what you have, we can implement the security across all those environments. Cool. And here's a little blurb on who we protect. We got some big financial services, healthcare, manufacturing, retail, transport and logistics, telecom, and of course your online services. We also, most folks here would be really interested in is our Guardicore Labs. So Guardicore Labs, these are our elite Israeli hacking team that we have in Tel Aviv. They've created a tool called Infection Monkey. This is free, super easy, open source. What this essentially does is you release it within your environment and it does an assessment with your segmentation, goes out, starts attacking, propagating throughout your network. Really fun to see. And then we give you a nice little list out and a little report on how exposed you are. And then what Infection Monkey shows you, then our Centra will then fix. So with that, let me jump into the actual demo. Ta-da, here we go. Okay, so here is what we have at Guardicore Centra. A little bit undercover. Are based. And so what this really looks like is we can, running an agent on each one of these systems, it is a proprietary kernel driver that we add. Okay? We work in two different spaces. We're in the user space and in the kernel space. Okay? The user space, really it's just the reporting. The kernel space itself is where we do the actual enforcement, policy enforcement. And because we're on an agent, we're not and it's proprietary entirely from Guardicore's perspective. We're not using firewalls, native firewalls like your Windows firewall. We're not using IP tables. It's a complete proprietary driver. Okay, this allows us then to launch down into the system itself and be able to see the actual processes that are communicating. So we can see here like Tomcat's communicating to. Let's check this database server on the other side. So we got Tomcat communicating to MongoD, and then that allows us as a proprietary driver to be able to implement these policies all the way up to that specific process. Okay, and then let me get rid of these controls for my sharing. And I can this open, and we can actually see what these processes are doing. Here we go. We got the Java process for Tomcat, and we see what the path that it's running from, the actual hash involved. And we can see the command line that instantiated that process. But then, this looks as ugly as it does. What we do is that we're going to group up all these systems. And so each one of those agents has it's a key value store. And each one of those key value stores basically allows us to tag, or what we call grouping, all these systems together. So then you can see all your systems as you want. And then from anywhere within these groups, like here, let's go into production. You see all the applications running here within production, okay? So then you can look to see what their dependencies are. And we could actually dive down deep into app billing, and we could see all the different roles that make up our billing application. And we could see all the communications between the different roles. Again, we could blast down. Oops, I hit the wrong button there. We could blast down into the actual, say, database role, see all the systems that are running, and then go deep dive into the actual processes that are running within those systems. See, here's again our MongoDB process. And then anywhere that we see fit, go ahead and filter by this billing. We could get rid of everything else. And so then we could say, all right, let's go ahead and create a policy. And now we're going to maintain policy based on, oops, there we go. That's a little bit easier. So here's our production. We've got our role, our load balancers, our database servers, our web servers. And then what we could do is create two types of app segmentation or a micro segmentation policy. Okay. So I'll start us off real quick on the app segmentation. We just right click. We say we use from this visibility map. We could create a ring fence for that actual application itself. Okay? So just concentrating on billing. We automatically create these rules for you that says billing can talk to billing, and everything inside of this ring fence, we really don't care at this point in time yet, right? Because we're doing this high level. So we those get marked as green. See, our load balancer's talking to web servers and the web server talking to the database server. That's hitting on this allow rule. And then we have this other auto rule here for alert. Anybody talking to billing, we're going to go ahead and alert on that yet. We're not going to block anything yet. So here's a communication coming from infrastructure that is hitting on that rule, so it gets marked as red. So we could do a little bit of a deeper dive and to see what in the infrastructure is communicating. Okay, cool. It's my jump box. I want to go ahead and allow that. We just right click, add allow rule. All right, so then that creates that rule from a specific label. Those are our groups, okay, going to from jump box, going to our load balancers, and it's grabbing that specific process there, that layer 7 process on your source and layer 7 process on your destination. So we got the wget process communicating to Nginx. Okay? And so then we're looking around, everything else looks good. Okay, cool. Now we could feel into this and go ahead and say, let this soak in for like, say, a week. Make sure we didn't miss anything, maybe longer if this is maybe an application that is dependent on, say, more time-based business processes like over your quarters or end of year or something like that. So then we just right-click, get the mouse over it, and we can shoot that from alert down and blocking. And now we have an application ring fence hard policy. Okay. Next step. I'm sorry. I usually when these demos are, I'd like to have a little bit of interaction, but I'm kind of having to blow through this a little fast. Next step, we're going to do a little micro segmentation. Okay. So what that does is that took that billing to billing rule that we didn't really care at that previous stage. Now we do care. So we're going to move that into alerting. Okay. That now is alerting. So all this communication that's hitting on that rule turns red. And then same deal. Go through here, right click on all the communications, add allow rule, and then everything gets created then again from process to process and then with your traditional destination ports. And then ta-da, we are now micro-segmented. Again, you let that soak, you look at all the alerts. Maybe there's something that is going to come up and you're going to miss it, so the alert will tell you. And then we're going to say, let's move that into block stage. And then there, now we're ring fenced and we're micro segmented and we're in a hard policy. So cool. And with that, let me just dive a little bit more into these labels because the labels are really, really important to understand And it also shows you the flexibility of our solution. Let me go into one of these servers again. So here's my billing, just looking at billing. Highlighting on this Web 2 server, we can see in the lower, just open that up to look at the processes. In the lower right-hand corner, we can see all the labels that are applied. And again, these are key value stores. So there's many ways that we can actually create these labels. We can ingest them through other systems. So if you have a CMDB or some type of a trusted source, ServiceNow, could be a spreadsheet, could be any way that we maintain and manage some semblance of your environment. If you don't have that, then of course Guardicore can be that place of trust. All right, so we can pull in, we can build these based on API. Here's a really simple way that we could do it just visually through the UI. We could create labels. Say, let's just create a label called conference, and we're going to go wide. And then we could do this based on some criteria, either naming convention or IP address. So for naming conventions, we could do, starts with, contains. This is if your environment has a fairly coherent naming convention that you guys are following. Okay. If you don't, we can do it based on IP addresses. This creates, then here, I'm going to delete this. This creates something to this effect like here. Here's application accounting. Create all these, this is based on a naming convention, then it matches your assets. Okay. We also have the ability to do this from a visual perspective. So here, I'm going to clear all my filters. We can see all of our different environments. I'm going to ungroup these guys. So we can see all our different assets of all of our different workloads. And let's just grab a couple of these guys over here. Say, I'm just going to grab these randomly. And down here, I'm going to grab my hand. This is my little draggy hand. And at this point, I could just, from a batch perspective, I could say, here, let's do my conference. And Wild West Hack Fest. And so then we reload, and then we could label pretty much on the go as you see fit. This really allows you then to contextualize your environment to any particular needs that you have. So we just created this conference. I even misspelled it, so there you go, that you know that it was done on the fly. Here's all those systems that I just dragged into my Wild West Hack and Fest conference. Okay? So why do we want to do this? Multiple use cases. Because we are just a key value store, you can create any type of labeling and view your systems as you need to on the fly, scheduled. Basically, it's a report. It's a report from a forensics perspective. I want to be able to see what happened last Tuesday for these particular systems. I want to be able to, group my systems based on, here, we got some examples here, based on owner. Here's all the different owners of the particular systems that they have. And then inside there, we can multi-tier these labels so that you can see all the owners' applications that they have. You can do type. You can say endpoints, servers. You can do operating systems. So you'd be able to group all your systems based on operating systems. Like say if you have Windows 2008s, Windows 2003s, lots of different legacy systems in your environment, you could create policy on a label. So that means you could create policy based on an operating system. Right? All right. So really what that means is it's pure flexibility. Okay? And then what we like to do here is create these maps. Okay? So I'll walk you through creating a map. These maps are reports. It's essentially the time that we are in your environment through those agents. And we also have an agentless approach that we have. We call them collectors. Those collectors are essentially sniffers that are sitting in your environment where then you port mirror traffic to those collectors. They're gathering up the same information that the agents do, minus we're not seeing, of course, up to the process level. We're just seeing that layer 4 communications. So creating these maps, first, we start on a time frame. When do you want to see what happened in your data center? Okay, it's a time machine. So we could go back yesterday, last week, last 30 days. We could do a custom range. Let's go back to the 3rd or the 6th of last week. Okay, maybe this is before you got that you did some type of a patch, maybe an upgrade to a system. Maybe there was an incident that happened at that time. Okay, then we could filter on exactly what we want to see, or we could exclude. We could look at what we don't want to see. All right, so just remove things. But the filtering is quite important because we can really lock down to exactly what it is that you're after. Okay, so we can look at specific applications that are running in your environment. And now this is really key because that agent is sitting on your OS. We're not doing application fingerprinting. Okay, first and foremost, we're not doing deep packet inspection into the payloads of your data. That would create scaling problems, performance issues. So we don't have to because we're an agent on the system itself. So we're seeing this list here is every single application that's running in the environment. Okay, so we can look at all Java traffic, all NGX. We can look at stuff that maybe is nefarious within your environment, like this ATTK. Okay, and we can look at assets, connections to or from assets. We can look at those labels themselves. So we could go through all these different labels, only want to look at a specific environment. Okay, we can look at connection types, failed connection types, blocked, that would be like from a third party tool, like say a firewall. All right, redirected to deception. So that's something I think a lot of folks in this community here will be really interested in, and I'll try to get to that if I have time, is our dynamic deception engine. So that's essentially a honeypot service that we provide to every single one of those agents as they see traffic leaving their systems, or those collectors, if they see traffic in the environment that looks potentially malicious, they're going to take that packet, that SYN packet of that malicious traffic, potentially malicious traffic, and they're going to send those to an off-site, out of your data center, dedicated dynamic deception engine, which is essentially just a honeypot. And then we're going to really be able to determine if that's malicious or not. So then we can look at IP addresses, specific policy rules. You can look to see if a particular policy rule is how it's affecting your environment. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to jump back into my billing, look at just that specific environment. So here's my app billing, and now this is going to be for all environments, say production, development, that applies to billing. They also include exact connection times. This is quite important because a lot of our competition out there in the market is, you get the ability. They're giving you a map similar to this, but they're only going to be showing you samples of what they see in the environment. We're going to show you exactly what's happening in your environment, every single connection. Okay? So we're going to create this map. A little side note while this is building. Maps can be shared. Maps can be automatically created. Here we go. So we got ours. So like on a daily instance, we can create these maps. And then, and then we create these maps. They're essentially your baseline. You create these maps so that you can create a report, like say for compliance. We can say here's all my systems that are PCI in scope. And here's every single communication that they had through this period of time. And with those communications, we could say, here's all the rules that were applied to every single one of those communications. So it is literally a proof of your policy as far as compliance is concerned. All right. So again, here's our map. And once we create these maps, and we could go in, all right, Click on the correct thing there. And we could go in again and we could further filter down to exactly what we want. So if we want to say exclude, let's see, internet connections, something like that. I want to exclude all my to and from the internet. And so then that really concentrates on what's happening within your environment itself. Lots of different ways to exclude, lots of different ways to include your policies. So that's really it from a visibility perspective. Then I was able to show you guys real quick, and I apologize for how fast I went through all this, but creating rules based on the maps, or we also, of course, we have the ability to create rules in more or less your traditional sense. Cool. And how am I doing on time?
You've got about 3 minutes.
I think you guys will be a little bit more interested here on, let me do the dynamic deception real quick. So again, these systems, agents, collectors, they're all sitting there looking at this communication, and depending on if this connections are hitting on a specific algorithm, say, hey, maybe these are a little bit sketchy, we will wrap that traffic up and we will send this traffic to a dynamic deception engine. And what that looks like is something like this. So here's a user coming from accounting web 2 going after a particular IP address. Maybe that IP doesn't exist. Maybe they're not running SSH. We're seeing that as maybe probing. And so we're saying, okay, let's go ahead and allow them to log in. And then you see we got a laundry list of whitelisted passwords. We see all their connection. They log in, they download a file, they execute that file, and then we got a process listening in the back door, and then they bounce, and then we give you recommended actions. So from here, from our orchestration, we could go ahead and take snapshots of that virtual system, shut it down, basically quarantine it, much like my family is today. And then we could block all the traffic all out there, send out a policy rule to basically shut this down anywhere else that's being seen, give you all of this information that we gather. But what we use this information for is our reputation analysis. So as we're seeing all of this communications throughout your environment, we're going to give you reputation scores for IP addresses that you're communicating with or from. And then we also give you reputation on processes that are running in your environment. We give you reputation for domains that you're communicating with. And so that really looks like we're able to help you from an incident perspective, from a breach perspective, retain that lateral movements, stop that from happening, and then give you scores on reputation that's happening. We also have the ability to create rules based on fully qualified domain names because we're an agent sitting on the system. We know exactly who you're communicating with. Holy cow, what else? How am I doing on time?
About 30 seconds.
30 seconds. All right, so I should probably just wrap it up. Thanks, guys, for your time. I really wish this is more or less in person. Anytime you guys want to get a little bit deeper dive, see how this works in your environment, hit me up. My partner and I would love to come out after this whole pandemic is over to do this in person, which is what I really enjoy to do. So with that, I thank you. Go out and grab this infection monkey. Where is it? Infection monkey. Play with it.
So much.
All right. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks. See ya.